19 people hanged. One man crushed to death under heavy stones. 5 more died in prison. And not a single one of them was a witch. What actually happened in Salem, Massachusetts in 1692 wasn't magic. It wasn't the devil. It was something far more dangerous. It was a group of deeply religious people, so terrified of sin, so convinced that God was watching their every move that they turned on each other like animals. And the worst part? The people who started it all were children. Stay with me, because this story gets darker before it gets clearer. And if you're watching this without being subscribed, you're about to regret that by the end. Let's go back, way back. The year is 1692. The place is Salem Village, a small, cold, miserable farming community in Massachusetts. Now imagine your entire world looks like this. You wake up before sunrise, you pray, you work in frozen fields, you pray again, you eat in silence, you pray again. You go to sleep terrified that God is judging everything you did wrong that day. That's Puritan life. The Puritans were a deeply intense branch of Christianity. They believed that every single thing in life, every sickness, every failed crop, every storm was either a blessing from God or a punishment from the devil. There was no in-between, no gray area, no maybe it's just bad luck. No, if something went wrong, it was because evil was at work. And they were obsessed with that idea. Think about what that does to a community over time. You've got hundreds of people living together, watching each other, judging each other, all convinced that Satan himself is trying to infiltrate their village. And here's where it gets interesting. Salem Village was already falling apart before the witch trials even began. There was a long-running feud between two powerful families, the Porters and the Putnams. There were land disputes, there was tension with the nearby town of Salem Town, which was richer and more modern. There was a new controversial minister named Samuel Parris, who half the village hated. So you've got a God-fearing community under enormous psychological pressure, a broken, divided neighborhood full of grudges, a religion that told them the devil was literally real and walking among them. All that's missing is a spark. January 1692. 2 girls start acting strange. Betty Parris, 9 years old, daughter of the minister Samuel Parris. Abigail Williams, 11 years old, his niece. They start having fits, screaming, convulsing, throwing themselves on the floor, hiding under furniture, speaking nonsense, claiming they're being pinched and bitten by invisible hands. The local doctor comes, examines them, and delivers a verdict that will destroy an entire community. He says, "I cannot find a natural cause." And just like that, the witch hunt begins. Now here's what every history book glosses over, and this is the part that should genuinely disturb you. Those fits, modern historians and medical professionals have several theories about what was actually happening. Some say it was ergot poisoning, a fungus that grows on rye grain during cold, wet winters. Ergot contains compounds similar to LSD. It causes hallucinations, convulsions, burning sensations, all the symptoms the girls described. Others say it was a combination of stress, social pressure, and attention-seeking behavior that spiraled completely out of control. Others think it may have been genuine psychological trauma, girls living under extreme religious pressure who found in their fits a kind of power they'd never had before. Because here's the thing nobody talks about. The moment those girls started accusing people, adults listened to them. In a world where children were seen and not heard, suddenly these little girls had the entire village hanging on their every word. That's a dangerous kind of power for anyone, let alone a child. And if you think the story can't get more twisted from here, you haven't subscribed yet, have you? Because it absolutely does. The girls are asked, "Who's doing this to you? Who is hurting you?" And they named 3 people. Titiba, an enslaved woman from Barbados who worked in the Parris household, Sarah Good, a homeless beggar woman who people already disliked, Sarah Osborne, an older woman who hadn't been to church in months. Notice anything? These aren't powerful people. These are the people that Salem society had already pushed to the margins. The enslaved woman, the beggar, the church avoider. The girls, consciously or not, had picked the people that nobody would rush to defend. Tithiba, under interrogation, does something unexpected. She confesses. And not just confesses, she performs. She tells them, yes, the devil came to her. She describes a tall man in black. She says she saw animals. She says there were other witches in Salem, people she couldn't name yet. The room goes electric. There are more of them. And now the hysteria really begins. Here's what Titiba probably understood that her accusers didn't. In Salem, the people who confessed didn't get executed. The people who refused to confess, who maintained their innocence, were hanged as unrepentant witches. Think about that for a second. If you told the truth, you died. If you lied and played along, you lived. Salem had created a system where honesty was a death sentence. What happened next is what historians call mass hysteria. But that phrase makes it sound clinical and distant. Let me make it real for you. Imagine you're living in this village. Everyone is terrified. The minister is preaching weekly that Satan is among you. Your neighbor just got arrested for witchcraft. Your kids come home scared. Your crops are struggling. It's winter, it's dark, it's cold. And then someone accuses you. What do? Because here's a trap. Defending yourself makes you look guilty. Asking for evidence makes you look like you're protecting witches. Even expressing doubts about the trials could get you accused. One man, a former minister named John Proctor, publicly questioned the trials, called them nonsense, said the girls were liars. He was arrested, tried, and hanged. The accusation spread like wildfire. Within months, over 200 people had been accused, and the accusers, they got bolder. Abigail Williams, the 11-year-old who started this, accused some of the most respected people in the colony. She accused the wife of the governor. She accused wealthy, church-going, well-regarded citizens. The circle of accusation got wider and wider until it started to swallow people that even the most terrified villagers had trouble believing were witches. And that's when the cracks started to show. But before we get there, real quick, if you've made it this far and you're still not subscribed, I genuinely don't know what you're waiting for. This is the good part. Let's talk about the people who died, because they deserve to be named. Bridget Bishop was the first to hang, June 10th, 1692. She ran a tavern. She wore red. She was the kind of woman that made Puritans nervous just by existing. Rebecca Nurse, 71 years old, a grandmother, a deeply respected churchgoer. When she was first examined, the jury found her not guilty. The judges sent the jury back in. They came back with a guilty verdict. She was hanged anyway. Giles Corey, 80 years old, refused to enter a plea at his trial. In colonial law, if you didn't enter a plea, your property couldn't be seized by the court. He was protecting his family's inheritance. His punishment was pressing. For 2 days, they laid him on the ground and stacked heavy stones on his chest, trying to force a plea out of him. His only response, as the weight crushed the life out of him, was reportedly more weight. He never broke. These weren't evil people. They weren't witches. They were farmers and grandmothers and tavern owners who refused to lie to save their lives. And the terrified, God-obsessed community killed them for it. Now here's the question that matters. How does this happen? How do intelligent, functioning adults look at a 9-year-old having a fit and decide the logical response is to start hanging people? 3 things. And these 3 things show up in every mass hysteria event in history. Number 1, fear fills the gaps that knowledge can't. The Puritans didn't have germ theory, they didn't have neurology, they didn't have psychology. When a child had a seizure, they had no framework to understand it except a religious one. The devil did it. That wasn't stupidity, it was the only explanation their world gave them. Number 2, authority figures validate the madness. The ministers preached it. The judges accepted spectral evidence, meaning someone could say, "I saw your spirit in my dream hurting me," and that counted in court. When the people in charge of reality testing lose the plot, everyone else follows. Number 3, accusation became currency. If you accused someone, you were protected. If you were silent, you were suspicious. The system rewarded paranoia and punished reason. Once that dynamic is in place, the hysteria feeds itself. Sound familiar? Because this pattern, fear plus authority plus social pressure, doesn't live only in 1692. It shows up everywhere humans get scared and start looking for someone to blame. Salem is a mirror, and most people don't like what they see in it. By the fall of 1692, something shifted. The accusations had gone too far. Too many respectable people were in jail. The governor's own wife had been named. And here's the moment that broke the spell. A prominent Boston minister named Increase Mather stood up and said, publicly, loudly, that spectral evidence was not reliable, that it was better for 10 guilty witches to go free than for one innocent person to die. The ground shifted. Suddenly, people started questioning the trials out loud. The special court that had been handling the cases was dissolved. The remaining accused were released. And then, nothing. No accountability, no justice, no reckoning. The system just moved on. Well, almost. In 1697, 5 years later, Samuel Sewall, one of the judges who had sentenced people to death, stood up in church and publicly apologized. He accepted personal blame. He stood in silence as his apology was read aloud. It was one of the earliest public apologies by a government official in American history. And in 1706, Ann Putnam Jr., one of the original accusers who had been 12 years old during the trials, gave a public confession. She said she had been deceived by the devil. She didn't name names or take direct personal blame, but it was something. The last person officially cleared of their Salem conviction? That happened in 2001, 300 years later. Now, let's talk about the thing this video is actually about, because you can't tell the story of Salem without asking the hard question. What role did Christianity, specifically the Puritan brand of Christianity, play in killing 25 innocent people? And the answer is a central one. This wasn't a case of religion being twisted by bad actors from the outside. The theology itself, the belief in a literal, active devil who could possess people and corrupt souls, was the engine that drove the hysteria. The belief that God was watching and judging, that suffering was punishment, that purity had to be policed, these weren't fringe ideas. They were the mainstream of Puritan theology. The ministers didn't just allow the trials, many of them encouraged them, preached sermons that stoked fear, provided theological cover for spectral evidence, called the accused servants of Satan from the pulpit. Now, and this matters, it's also true that other Christians pushed back. Increase Mather, who helped end the trials, was a minister. Thomas Brattle, who wrote a blistering letter condemning the court, was a man of faith. Religion can cut both ways. It can be the source of the hysteria, and it can also be the voice that calls it out. But what Salem shows us is this: when a faith becomes so certain of its own correctness that it stops questioning itself, when doubt becomes dangerous and conformity becomes survival, terrible things follow. Every single time. That's not an attack on faith. That's a lesson from history. Salem was 1692. You might think, cool story, doesn't apply to me. But here's the thing. The mechanism of Salem, fear, group pressure, authority, and a desperate need to find someone to blame, that mechanism is still running. You see it in political movements that treat disagreement as treason. You see it in online communities that pile on whoever gets accused, trial be damned. You see it in religious and political spaces where questioning the group's beliefs gets you cast out as a traitor or a heretic. The witches change, the trials don't. And the hardest, most uncomfortable question Salem asks us is this: in your time, in your community, are you the accused or are you the one throwing stones? Because almost nobody in Salem thought they were the villain. Everyone thought they were protecting something holy. 25 people died in Salem. Not because of witchcraft, because of certainty, because a community was so sure it knew who the enemy was that it never stopped to ask if it was wrong. That's the real lesson of the Salem Witch Trials. And if this video made you think, even a little, hit subscribe, because we go this deep on history every single week, and you do not want to miss what's coming next. Drop a comment below. Do you think something like Salem could happen today? I read every single one. I'll see you in the next one.